In the quiet town of Athens, Ohio, 1856, three identical sisters were born, yet only one had a heartbeat. What followed was a series of terrifying events whispered about in medical journals and buried by time. These were no ordinary triplets, and to this day no scientist, historian, or skeptic has been able to explain what truly happened inside the Holloway farmhouse. In the winter of 1856, deep within the rural outskirts of Athens, Ohio, the Holloway family experienced a birth that would baffle generations to come. Margaret Holloway, the mother, endured a grueling labor that lasted nearly 36 hours. When it was over, three identical girls were delivered within minutes of each other, each with the same pale skin, same flaxen hair, and same unsettlingly glassy blue eyes. The midwife, an elderly woman from the next town over, declared only one of them alive. The other two, cold and unmoving, showed no signs of life, no pulse, no warmth, no breath. She began preparing their tiny bodies for burial. But just before the midwife wrapped them in cloth, one of the infants slowly opened her eyes. No gasping breath, no cry, just a silent, blinking stare. Startled, the midwife re-examined both bodies. Still, no heartbeat, no circulation. Yet their eyes followed movement in the room, and their tiny fingers twitched ever so slightly. What should have been mourned as a stillbirth had become something disturbingly in between. Doctors from the nearest county hospital were summoned days later. Their diagnosis was inconclusive. One child, whom the family named Clara, was medically healthy and responded like any normal infant. The other two, named Elsie and Matilda, defied all medical understanding. They remained eerily still, never crying, never feeding, yet somehow remained present. Their skin remained cool to the touch. Their pupils dilated, but didn't track light in a natural way. They were pricked with needles. They didn't flinch. Yet each morning they were found in slightly different positions in their crib, as if they had shifted in the night. Rumors spread quickly through the town. Some said the girls were touched by spirits. Others whispered about the Holloway family's supposed connection to ancient Appalachian folk rituals. The local pastor refused to baptize the children, citing their unnatural condition. As the months passed, Clara grew like a normal infant, laughing, crawling, developing speech. But her sisters remained the same. No sounds ever came from their mouths. They didn't eat, yet never withered. Their hair grew, their fingernails lengthened, and most disturbingly, their faces changed in tandem with Clara's, as if the three were aging together, though only one of them was truly alive. A physician from Cincinnati visited the family in early 1857 and wrote an anonymous article about a case of living anatomical mimicry. He theorized that the twins might be some form of biological reflection, mirroring Clara's development despite lacking vital signs. But when asked to revisit for further study, he declined and never returned. He later told colleagues he had witnessed something unnatural in the Holloway home, something he would never speak of again. The twins' existence became a local enigma. No one could understand why two lifeless bodies would not decay, and why, against all logic, they continued to grow. Birth should have been a celebration. Instead, it became a haunting mystery that would only deepen with time. As the years passed, the Holloway triplets became a quiet obsession for those who knew of them. By the age of 5, Clara was an ordinary child in every visible way, playful, talkative, and intelligent. But Elsie and Matilda remained frozen in their eerie silence, unchanged in behavior, but unmistakably growing. Their limbs lengthened in proportion to Clara's, and their facial features matured in sync with hers, yet they never spoke a word, never reacted to the world around them, and never engaged in the games or joys of childhood. The only thing they ever seemed to acknowledge was Clara herself. Everywhere Clara went, her sisters followed. They walked when she walked, sat when she sat, and stood when she stood, always a few feet behind her, moving in perfect rhythm. Their footsteps were soundless, and their faces remained blank of any expression. This precise mimicry extended beyond movement. If Clara wore a ribbon in her hair, the twins would somehow acquire the same ribbon within hours. If she tore her dress or scraped her knee, identical marks would inexplicably appear on the other's clothing or skin. No one could explain how or why this happened, and it became a source of deep discomfort for those around them. Despite being biologically unresponsive, the twins were never sick. They did not cough, sneeze, or exhibit any symptoms of childhood illness. While Clara ate, the other two sat at the table with untouched plates. Food placed in front of them would go cold, uneaten, only to disappear by morning without any trace. Family members insisted they never saw the twins consume anything, nor did they produce waste or signs of digestion. When a physician attempted to draw blood from Matilda, no blood came, only a dry puncture mark that vanished within the hour. By the age of 10, Clara began to notice what others whispered about behind closed doors. She confided to her parents that she often felt as if her thoughts were not her own. Sometimes, she claimed, she could feel her sisters inside her head, watching. When she cried, they smiled. When she was frightened, they appeared calm. She described waking up in places she didn't remember falling asleep, with the twins already standing near her bed. Her parents dismissed these concerns as imagination, but others feared something more sinister was unfolding. Local children were forbidden from playing near the Holloway property. A neighbor swore he saw the twins standing in the middle of the field one night during a thunderstorm, unblinking and untouched by the rain. Another reported hearing a strange humming coming from their room, low, harmonic, and not produced by any known instrument or human voice. Whenever someone tried to observe the family too closely, strange occurrences seemed to follow. Disoriented animals, broken clocks, or sudden fevers with no cause. Elsie and Matilda, in all appearances, were still part of the living world, but everything about them contradicted nature. Their presence was neither life nor death. It was something else, something enduring, something that refused to be named. By the time the Holloway triplets reached adolescence, the mystery surrounding them had evolved into something far more disturbing. The inexplicable bond between Clara and her silent sisters deepened, manifesting in physical and psychological ways that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or superstition. What had once been seen as mere mimicry began to resemble a biological tether, one in which Clara's experiences, injuries, and emotions echoed visibly through Elsie and Matilda. The earliest and most well-documented example of this phenomenon involved a minor accident. At the age of 12, Clara tripped on a staircase and cut her palm on a wooden railing. Within minutes, matching lacerations appeared on the palms of both Elsie and Matilda, even though neither had come into contact with the stairs. Witnesses observed the cuts as identical in depth and placement, bleeding in perfect symmetry, then clotting at the same rate as Clara's own wound. The injuries healed within the same number of days, forming scars that never faded. 3 sets of identical marks, branded into their skin without explanation. These mirrored injuries continued throughout the years. Every bruise, scratch, and fever Clara experienced manifested in the other two, sometimes even more severely. If Clara suffered a cold, her sisters' bodies trembled with symptoms, but they made no sound, showed no fatigue, and remained perfectly still, even as their skin flushed and their eyes watered. Physicians who attempted to document this phenomenon found their notes frequently vanished or were mysteriously altered. One doctor claimed that every photograph taken of the 3 girls developed with Clara clearly visible, but the other 2 always appeared blurred, as if the camera lens couldn't properly capture them. The psychological toll on Clara was undeniable. Her journals, later recovered in fragments, revealed that she often felt pain without cause, only to realize her sisters bore fresh wounds. She described a sensation of being watched from within her own mind, as if her consciousness was being shared. Dreams became indistinguishable from reality. She would awaken to find her hands clenched in strange gestures, her voice hoarse from speaking words she couldn't remember saying. The community grew increasingly alarmed. Children spoke of seeing the twins mimicking Clara's facial expressions with a half-second delay, like a distorted reflection. Adults claimed the girls moved in unison so precisely that it defied natural coordination. A local school teacher reported that when Clara was called to the front of the class, Elsie and Matilda, sitting in the back, would simultaneously lift their hands or turn their heads in perfect synchronization. Yet they were never enrolled. They never wrote, spoke, or acknowledged anyone except Clara. The term mirror phenomenon was first used in a regional medical journal anonymously, referring to the Holloway case as a probable instance of supernatural neurological entanglement. But even that definition failed to capture the reality. This was not duplication, it was not imitation, it was a parasitic reflection of Clara's existence, an echo of flesh and spirit in two hollow forms that absorbed everything she endured without ever truly living themselves. In 1871, word of the Holloway triplets had spread beyond Ohio, attracting the attention of fringe scientists, spiritualists, and occult researchers. Among them was Dr. Alaric Venn, a physician with a reputation for investigating unexplained biological phenomena, and a fascination with what he called non-local consciousness, a theory suggesting that minds could exist beyond physical form. He arrived in Athens under the guise of offering medical assistance, but his true intent was to document and dissect the mystery that had eluded explanation for over a decade. The Holloway family, worn down by years of isolation and suspicion, agreed reluctantly to allow Dr. Venn to observe the girls. He moved into the house for 6 weeks and kept extensive notes, entries that would later be known as the Forbidden Journal. This journal, recovered from a sealed crawl space decades later, revealed chilling details that had never been made public at the time. Venn approached the phenomenon methodically at first. He conducted non-invasive tests, measuring heart rate, brain activity, and body temperature. As expected, Clara exhibited all the normal markers of life. Elsie and Matilda, on the other hand, showed nothing. No pulse, no warmth, no response to stimuli. Yet they moved, aged, and followed Clara's every movement with uncanny precision. Venn described them as corporeal shadows bound to a singular soul. The journal entries took a darker turn when Venn introduced controlled isolation. He placed Clara in a locked room for 24 hours and monitored the twins' behavior. According to his notes, Elsie and Matilda became agitated, pacing the floor in perfect unison with Clara's movements, despite having no visual or auditory contact. More disturbingly, one entry mentioned a nosebleed Clara suffered during the experiment, instantly mirrored by both twins, down to the volume and pattern of tool. Blood droplets, driven by obsession, Venn turned to less ethical methods. He initiated a series of seances in the household, hoping to contact what he believed was an external force inhabiting the twins. The journal describes one session in which furniture shook and strange symbols appeared on the walls, drawn in an unknown substance. Clara was later found with identical marks on her arms, as if scratched from within. The final entries became fragmented, erratic, and laced with fear. Venn wrote of waking to find the twins standing over his bed, unmoving, their eyes wide open. He claimed they were beginning to move independently of Clara, delayed by seconds, but now slightly out of sync, as if asserting their own presence. His last complete note read, "One of them smiled at me tonight. It was not Clara's smile." Shortly after, Dr. Venn disappeared without a trace. His belongings were left behind. The Holloways offered no explanation, and no formal investigation was ever pursued. The journal vanished until it was rediscovered in the early 1900s during renovation of the property. The implications of his writings disturbed even the most skeptical researchers. They suggested something more than mimicry, something closer to possession, entanglement, or an experiment in life and death that had gone terribly wrong. By the early 1880s, the Holloway household had become an object of fear and folklore. While the family maintained an outward appearance of seclusion and normalcy, strange rumors swirled through the community, rumors that went beyond the eerie presence of the silent twins. Local residents whispered about animals vanishing without a trace, about strange lights seen in the Holloway fields at night, and about a growing sense of unease that settled over the area like a permanent fog. The first disappearance occurred in the spring of 1881. A young farmhand named Tobias Wren, who worked on a neighboring property, was last seen delivering firewood to the Holloway house. His horse returned alone the following morning, the wagon still half filled. A search party scoured the woods and surrounding farmland, but found no sign of Tobias. The Holloways denied having seen him. Days later, a boy claimed to have seen Elsie and Matilda standing silently at the edge of the woods where Tobias had vanished, their hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the trees. Over the next 18 months, 4 more disappearances followed, 3 adults and 1 child, all with some connection to the Holloways. In each case, no evidence of struggle was found, no clues left behind. What tied them all together was proximity to the triplets and the inexplicable silence that followed any investigation. Sheriff's reports mysteriously went missing. Witnesses retracted their statements. Those who pressed too hard often fell ill or left town entirely. Fear took root in the town. Parents forbade their children from walking near the Holloway property. Church attendance surged, and the local pastor held nightly prayer vigils. A few brave individuals attempted to confront the family, demanding answers. They returned pale, shaken, unwilling to speak of what they had seen inside the house. One visitor claimed he saw the twins moving in different directions, for the first time not mirroring Clara, but rather operating on their own, with slow, deliberate gestures that seemed unbound by human behavior. By late 1883, the Holloway property was silent. Neighbors noted the sudden absence of activity, no smoke from the chimney, no flicker of candlelight at night, no footprints in the snow. When someone finally approached the house, they found the front door slightly ajar. Inside, everything was untouched. The table was set for dinner, a kettle sat cold on the stove, and personal belongings remained in place. But the family was gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle, not even a note. Only 3 items were left on the front porch, 3 antique dolls, dressed identically, each. With their mouths sewn shut with black thread, the house was abandoned, left to rot at the edge of town. Some said the land was cursed. Others believed the Holloways had been taken by forces unknown, or perhaps by something they had once welcomed in. Whatever the truth, no one ever lived in that house again, and no one ever saw the triplets again. Their story faded into whispered legend, too strange for belief, too consistent to dismiss. In 1907, more than 2 decades after the Holloways vanished, their abandoned home was purchased by a distant relative who intended to restore the aging property. What began as a simple renovation quickly transformed into something far more disturbing. As floorboards were lifted and walls stripped bare, the new owner uncovered remnants that suggested the strange history of the Holloway triplets had not only been real but perhaps even darker than local legends had preserved. Among the first discoveries was a series of hand-drawn diagrams hidden beneath the floor of the attic. These diagrams, etched in a language that appeared neither Latin nor English, depicted overlapping human figures surrounded by circles, sigils, and unfamiliar symbols. The illustrations showed triplets fused at the shadow, as if 3 bodies were bound by one soul. Some images portrayed internal organs connected by invisible threads, arteries stretching from one sister to another without physical contact. One drawing was labeled in faded ink, the binding of the 3rd vessel. Beneath a false panel in the cellar, a chest was recovered containing locks of identical blonde hair, old garments too small for an adult, and a stack of Clara Holloway's journals. These writings, now brittle and stained, detailed her emotional unraveling over the years. In one entry, she described waking with bruises she hadn't received, only to later see the same bruises on her sisters. In another, she wrote of dreams that bleed into the day, and how she feared she was being hollowed out from within. More unnerving was her mention of voices, not ones she heard aloud, but internal whispers too. Hat came in moments of silence. The voices, she claimed, weren't her own thoughts. They spoke in patterns she didn't understand, repeating phrases she couldn't translate. She suspected that Elsie and Matilda weren't merely mimicking her. They were drawing something from her, piece by piece, thought by thought. Also found were fragments of Dr. Alaric Venn's infamous Forbidden Journal, believed to be lost forever. These pages included detailed accounts of rituals allegedly performed inside the house. While most entries were clinical in tone, one passage stood out. It described a theory that Clara was not the source of the twins' behavior, but rather the vessel. According to Venn, Elsie and Matilda were external manifestations of something ancient, something that needed a living host to remain tethered to this world. Several of the objects unearthed were sent to researchers in New York, but many reportedly disappeared en route, never arriving at their destination. The house was quickly resold, then abandoned again after workers reported tools vanishing, windows shattering without cause, and fleeting glimpses of pale figures standing in doorways. The physical evidence, long buried and hidden away, did not bring clarity. It only deepened the mystery. What had once been dismissed as folklore now had form. The Holloway triplets were no longer just a ghost story. They were a documented anomaly, an unresolved echo of something no science could contain and no faith could fully banish. Over time, the story of the Holloway triplets faded into the backdrop of local folklore, an eerie tale passed down through generations, often recited around campfires or during long winter nights. To many, it was no more than a chilling legend, one of many strange stories to come out of rural 19th century America. Yet for those who dared to look deeper, pieces of the truth continued to surface in ways that defied coincidence or dismissal. In 1936, nearly 80 years after the Holloways' disappearance, a group of parapsychology researchers from Boston visited Athens, Ohio. Intrigued by scattered reports of the triplets and the rumors of mirror children, they traced the remaining fragments of documentation, school records, journal excerpts, and local newspaper clippings. What they found was inconsistent but eerily suggestive. Drawings of identical girls appearing in the margins of unrelated family Bibles, medical records noting simultaneous injuries on non-identical siblings, and references in multiple towns to twins that never spoke. The same details appeared over and over: silent children who mirrored another's life, moved in uncanny synchrony, and were always one breath removed from death. In the 1950s, a photograph was discovered in a church basement in Kentucky, mislabeled and faded. It showed 3 girls standing in front of a farmhouse. One stood naturally, smiling faintly. The other 2 stood behind her, identical in face and form, but with blank stares and arms at their sides. The photo was dated 1880 and had no names. Yet the resemblance to the Holloway triplets was undeniable. Some believed it was one of the last known images taken before their disappearance. What remained most troubling was how frequently similar cases seemed to echo across the decades. In scattered corners of the country, people reported children with inexplicable connections, one sibling falling ill while the other bore the symptoms, twins speaking the same sentence at once without prior communication, or children who acted as though they were vessels for something beyond human understanding. These cases were rare, isolated, and quickly dismissed, but their details mirrored the Holloways in uncanny detail. In recent years, interest in the case has resurfaced, particularly among researchers of psychological phenomena and law's biology. The Holloway home, long since reclaimed by forest and decay, remains undisturbed, its stone foundation buried beneath vines, its cellars sealed off by state officials after an unauthorized investigation, uncovered animal remains arranged in unnatural patterns. Locals avoid the site. Even modern technology fails near it. Cameras malfunction, GPS signals vanish, and visitors report a pervasive sense of disorientation and dread. The story of the Holloway triplets endures not because of what was proven, but because of what was never fully explained. A birth that defied biology, a bond that resisted logic, disappearances, symbols, voices, and mirrors that moved without light. Their legacy lives on not in books or official records, but in the spaces between truth and terror, where science refuses to go and where silence speaks the loudest. They were born together. They vanished together, but some believe they never really left.